Hey everybody, we're going to talk about chapter 17, which is all about interview techniques. Whether you're going to be a broadcast journalist, print journalist, any sort of journalist at all, obviously interviewing is very important. They can also have great benefits no matter what you're going to do. Talking to people, getting them to open up, finding out what you need to know are skills that you can apply to anything. So when you think about interviewing, it's obviously a large part of news, broadcast production. And there are several things that I want you to know to get the most out of your interviews, right? Not the least of which is, why are you doing this interview? What is the purpose? If you don't have a firm grip on that and you're unclear yourself, you are never going to get the interview material that you need to do the story that you want. You have to decide what your story is before you can even start researching it or asking about it, right? There are different kinds of purposes for interviews that you'll find. One is factual. You're asking for your subject for information or to demonstrate something. Another purpose is explanation. Let's say you and your audience already know the facts, but you want to have your subject explain them or elaborate a bit. Opinion and controversy, right? You might be covering an issue over which there is some kind of debate, and you're asking the subject to comment on one side or another. Witness, experiential. Your subject may be witness or participant in an event that you and have some sort of personal experience which is relevant to your coverage. You might also be looking for some colorful descriptive insight that could involve emotion. Celebrity interviews. The main reason you're talking to this subject is because they're famous, but want to talk about their latest project or issue that's important to them, right? Those are five broad topics, broad focuses an interview might have. Of course, it's perfectly possible that the same person could give you different types of interviews or combine these elements, but the main thing you need to know as an interviewer is what you're looking for in the interview, right? And the only way to really know that is to prepare yourself. You want to prepare yourself because it's absolutely key. We've gone over this before in production. Pre-production is where it all really happens and where the success or failure of your project is cast. So first, have a list of questions you want to talk about and be prepared with follow-up questions. You need to write them down. Let me say that again. Write them down for yourself and also to help prime your mind and to figure out what the focus of your story is. You need to do research about your subject. Do not ever just wing it. Don't think, well, I watched Walking Dead. I know what to ask the creator. No, you want to really do some research. You want to know something so you can ask good pointed questions. If you are a good pointed interviewer and have done some research, you'll get a lot more out of your subject. They'll have respect for you, and they'll be much more inspired to engage with you on a deeper level. Prepare the subject and let them know what you want to talk about. Don't make them just wing it, right? If you're going to sit down with the president of the college and you want to talk to her about health benefits for students, make sure she knows that's what you're going to talk about. Don't just ask for a general interview if it's not a general interview. Tell her what you want to know and what you want to talk about so she can be ready. Something that I want everyone to think about that sounds so obvious is that when you're interviewing somebody, don't forget to listen. This might sound odd, but in the heat of the moment, it's all too easy for an interviewer to be concerned with everything else that's going around them, because there's a lot going on, than to give the subject their full attention, and that will inevitably impact the interview in a negative way. You need to be there for that subject and really listen to them. It'll also open up questions for you that perhaps you hadn't thought about. So you always want to open up with a question. Starting with a general question is a great way to begin the interview and warm up both yourself and your subject. You don't want to jump right into the big questions or the really detailed questions. You want to start generally. Follow-up questions are something you should always be aware of. And if you're not listening, it's very easy to miss those opportunities, right? If you're not listening and you're too focused on your prepared questions, you're going to miss opportunities to connect with a subject and naturally follow their answers, right? One of the most important things that you need to remember is to avoid closed question. A closed question is one to which an interviewer can only answer yes or no. So you want to use open questions because they give the subject somewhere to go with their answer, and they can't simply say yes or no and stop the discussion. right? So questions that start with how or why or can you tell me about will get you way more open answers and much more in-depth answers than those that start with did, do, are, things that are just asking for yes or no, right? You want the interview subject to open their mind and to really think about their answers. If you're going to ask a controversial question, if you're asking a subject to give an opposing view to something, let's say, make sure you frame the question in a way that makes it clear that you're not expressing your own personal viewpoint, but the viewpoint of others. You don't want this to turn into an argument between the two of you. You're the neutral third party, right? You're the intermediary. You're the middle person, right? So be careful about that. How do you feel questions? Be careful with those as answers. Be careful with how do you feel questions, because answers to those type of questions can almost be as closed as yes or no answer only questions. Instead, ask them to tell you about specific personal consequences or results from them around a situation or a question. How do you feel? Will pretty much bring you things like I felt good, I felt bad, I felt sad, I felt happy. You want more than that. You want them to think a little harder and give you a bit more. Anecdotes, right? You almost always want your subject to be engaging and colorful, so your viewer and listener will be much more engaged. So if they can give examples and anecdotes rather than simple and bland comments, you'll be much better off. If you can encourage you should encourage your subject to give examples and anecdotes, because that frees them up from their expected responses and allows them to be more relaxed and conversational with you as the interviewer. Ask about them, right? One question at a time. Never ask more than one question at a time. So keep your questions short and then follow up if needed. Do not try to pack all your questions into one super mega question. Instead of asking a long-winded question, split it up into parts. If you have a two-part question, it needs to be two questions, period. There's no reason to pack it into one. If your question is longer than 10 words or so, then it's likely too long. You really want to keep it simple. You want to avoid scripts. Don't let the subjects read their answers to you. Ugh, there's nothing more boring than listening to someone read. It makes for a boring interview, and it might as well be a text-only piece. So don't let them read them to you, okay? If at all possible. Don't wear dark glasses. Viewers need to see you and your eyes and their eyes. And if they can't, they're missing out on a very important part of nonverbal communication, and they're likely to disconnect from the story. So, especially obviously with TV, you want to remember that. Don't shoot in bright sunlight. If you're shooting in the bright sunlight, no one will want to watch because you and your subjects are squinting or there's glare in their eyes. Just make sure that you're shooting the video interview in a pleasant place. Don't eat or drink while you interview them. You see guests doing this a lot on celebrity talk shows. It's not a good idea with news productions, as it's simply too casual and the associated sounds can be off-putting and annoying, right? So unless you're lucky enough to have the Tonight Show, don't let them drink or eat. Try your absolute best not to interrupt the subject, right? While you want the interview to be conversational, you don't want to appear rude. So interrupting is one of those things that is almost impossible not to construe as being rude. So not only it could be off-putting to the guest and the audience, if you interrupt, it can make it very difficult to edit later, which of course brings us to crosstalk. Cross-talking is when you talk at the same time, not necessarily interrupting, but just talking at the same time when someone will say, yes, I see, or oh, while someone else is talking. We all do it all the time. That's how real life works. And you will be tempted to do that during the interview. But not only can that be annoying to a viewer or listener, it makes it so difficult to edit later. So remember that the interview is not about you, it's about your subject. And if you want to be responsive while they're talking, shake your head, nod your head yes, right? Make some sort of hand gesture that reinforces what they're saying, in solidarity or whatnot. Try not to talk. Try not to cross-talk. You'll thank me later. Communicating. Make sure your subject knows what's going on. If you need to set up the lights, tell them what's happening. If you have to do a sound check, let them know. It can be really nerve-wracking to be interviewed, and they're nervous. So make sure you're sensitive to that and keeping your subject comfortable and informed, right? Make sure all cell phones are off and not going to interrupt the taping of the interview. Just make sure they're off or on vibrate. Make sure that you're reassuring, right? unless you have a real pro on your hands, your subject is probably going to be nervous to some degree about being interviewed. So unless you're going out live, make sure that they know they can relax and not worry if they quote mess up unquote an answer, because it's no problem to do it again, right? So make sure that you're cognizant of this person sitting across from you, that they're a person. You always want to check your recording levels. Make sure that your crew or yourself is getting the audio and video that you need in the way you need it, and you're not distorting your material in a way due to levels. You're going to be really sorry if you do. We talked about levels before. It's one of the things you almost can't fix. Make sure, as we talked about before, that you record what we call wild track or room tone. Record some silence in the room, because you can use it for later editing purposes. And of course, when we say silence, that's in quotes because nothing is ever truly silent. The room has a sound, and you can use that to help with editing. Always remember to thank them, right? They're giving you your time. They're giving you their attention. They're there for you so you can do your story. If it weren't for them, the segment just wouldn't happen as recorded, right? So make sure that you're appreciative. Um, Being a good interviewer is combining a few things, right? Good research, knowing the types of questions to ask because you have a clear idea of the story, listening to the answers, and developing a good rapport with the subject. But above all else, you want to be professional, polite, and interested. And if you're those three things, it will go really well. So I want you to go to week 15, and there's a quiz, and participate in this week's discussion. And I will see you on the boards.